Well, welcome to this session on semantic interoperability in EOSC. It's organized by the FAIRCORE4EOSC and the FAIR-IMPACT projects that both have, I think one has semantic interoperability as an important topic, and the other one I think is only about semantic interoperability and fairness of semantic artifacts. Worthwhile topics, and we hope we can give you an overview what these projects are doing, but also give you the opportunity to give feedback and maybe some ideas on how these projects should treat the topic. Because although the project proposals are fixed, I think there is still sufficient room to steer the projects in say directions that can be even more beneficial than we have already in mind. The persons that are going to present are Oscar. You will maybe introduce yourself. I think that's working. That's working.
Okay, I mean, no problem. I'm Oscar Corcho. I work at Universidad Politécnica de Madrid, and I will be, commenting on what we are doing in FAIR-IMPACT in terms of semantic interoperability. I mean, you will see it next.
Me, I'm Dan Bruder, affiliated with Clarin Eric, and having a role in the FAIR-IMPACT project. Especially interested in what the semantic components that are going to be created within FAIRCORE can help the communities. And there's Tommy.
Yeah, hi, I'm Tommi Suominen from CSC. I'm the coordinator for FAIRCORE4EOSC and an information architect at CSC. So I have at CSC previously designed, for example, the information model for the national CRIS system.
Yeah, thank you, Tommy. So what we'll do is we first give you a general introduction in the two projects, FAIR-IMPACT and FAIRCORE. Then I will give a presentation that goes a bit deeper into what especially FAIRCORE could mean with respect to semantic interoperability for the communities, and perhaps communities of practice. Then we'll have an open microphone session. I'm curious what that will bring. Oscar will try to get some special feedback with respect to semantic artifacts that you may know about, and how they could be best be even made more fair. And then I think there is a topic which I put on in the agenda. First, I named it, is EOS doing enough for for semantic interoperability? But when I looked at what is already happening, I thought maybe we should also go into the question, are all these initiatives and projects that are doing something with semantic interoperability being coordinated well enough? Do they know of one another? How immense is the overlap or not? That could also be an outcome. So, would you start, Oscar?
Microphone, okay. So, very nice to have you all here. I mean, I see faces that I know, and also many others that I don't. So that's quite nice, because as you will see, I mean, one of the purposes that we have also in this session is not only telling you about what we are doing, but also telling you about where you can also have, provide us feedback on the avenues to explore, yeah? I mean, and things that, we should be considering that probably we wouldn't be able to consider before if we were just thinking top-down, yeah? I mean, so that's also one of the main aims of this session. So I'm in charge, first of all, of telling you a little bit about what, how to frame this work on semantic interoperability in the context of the FAIR-IMPACT project, and there could be probably, well, better people over here to discuss or to present FAIR-IMPACT, yeah? But I mean, basically just taking a couple of snapshots of some of the activities that we do, yeah? I mean, some of the work packages that we have. As you can see, I mean, like in FAIR-IMPACT, we are working on persistent identifiers, on metadata and ontologies, metric certification and guidelines, and there is an area over there that is cross-cutting, which is called interoperability. I mean, I assume that, I mean, that most of you are familiar with, I mean, like what we call interoperability. Everyone has a different angle, yeah, of the, which are the interests that we have in interoperability and which are the layers where we are working on. But I mean, this is just to give you like an overview of what we are doing. So as you see down there, the work, I mean, the place that we are concentrating on in the context of, I mean, this context of semantic interoperability is actually checking, identifying. We are not developing, yeah? We are just identifying, trying to see, provide recommendations, ideas, not prescribing, yeah? The core building blocks that would be needed for interoperability in the context of EOSC, yeah? So, I mean, it's quite a very broad kind of topic, yeah? I mean, and many of you who have been working in this area, you know how broad it is and how difficult it is to come up with this, taking into account the so many components that we have and also the many vertical domains that we can work with. But I mean, this is our aim, I mean, to give a little bit more details, yeah, on what can be done. More specifically, if we go into the current steps, I mean, the things that we are doing right now, you can see over there, like more or less like three main themes, yeah, that we are working on, yeah. On the one hand, we are now working on identifying those practices inside the use cases that we have inside the project, but also quite open to other cases that may come in. I mean, and this is one of the reasons of this session as well, where we can actually tell stories, yeah, stories about how the data, the software, all the components that we are using in research, they are searched for, they are used, they are, I mean, like used in terms of the experiments that we are actually running. And one of the key things that we want to identify is which are the interoperability pains, yeah, which are the problems, yeah, that people are currently facing. And I know, I mean, that many of you are actually facing them, yeah. And then these problems will be mapped afterwards into the needs for technical and semantic components in the context of technical and semantic interoperability. There are other tasks in the project that are focusing also on the legal and organizational interoperability. We are not covering these ones in this session, yeah? But I mean, just to frame, yeah, the work that we do. Then, starting with the previous work on the EOSC interoperability framework, the document that was produced as part of the FAIR working group, we are trying to go a little bit deeper, identifying which are all those functionalities, yeah, that the semantic interoperability or the components that are used for semantic interoperability should have, yeah? The document on purpose, and also because of lack of time, didn't go into the details of specifying functionalities. No, I mean, we just had boxes with names, yeah, metadata catalog, but we didn't say what the metadata catalog has to do, yeah, okay? That was done on purpose. I mean, we were just proposing or focusing especially on giving recommendations, identifying needs, yeah? And in this case, I mean, in the context of the project, we want to go a little bit further, identify those functionalities, again, without prescribing them, yeah? The basic idea is that many different communities may have different needs, and then what we want to establish is the pros and cons, yeah, of each of those ones, and identify core functionalities and advanced functionalities for some domains, yeah, okay? And in fact, I mean, I know that FAIRCORE4EOSC is going to be working on some of these things, yeah? And finally, we will go a little bit deeper much later, and also taking probably some of the work that has been done on the Semantic Interoperability Task Force, yeah? On exploring metadata models that can be used for data, for software, for all the research artifacts that we use. And I know, I mean, that over here there will be also many points for collaboration, yeah? So this is the main idea. As I'm telling you, we start from this document, yeah? This was the first part, I mean, the part that we are starting from. And taking into account this document, on it, I mean, we had many components identified. We tried to get the European interoperability reference architecture and tried to start mapping it, yeah, into what it would mean for EOSC. Yeah, I mean, at that point in time, that was 2 years ago, and we identified many technical components, enablers, different things on the legal and organizational view that was less developed, in fact, in the context of the document. And over there on that part, you have the semantic view that I can go a little bit further on, where we have things like metadata catalogs, semantic artifacts catalogs, mapping repositories, things that, I mean, that many of you are discussing about, yeah? And also semantic artifacts, understanding them in a very broad sense. I mean, it's not just ontologies, yeah, which are probably on that end, yeah. We also want data models, yeah. I mean, XSD, XML schema data types, XML schema documents. I mean, things that actually, I mean, allow us to combine some semantics, yeah. Even if, I mean, those ones who have been working on ontologies, that's my hat. I mean, we would always like to go a little bit further, yeah, and try to formalize as much as possible the elements, the components that we are talking about, yeah. So these are all these elements, yeah, that we were identifying over there in the document, and this is where we are starting from, yeah. So that's just to set up a little bit the context of where we are. Okay, so.
Thank you, Oscar.
It's you.
All right. Did you have the thing? Thanks.
This one?
I think not this one.
I think the other one.
Yeah, that one. All right, so a few words about FAIRCORE4EOSC, and specifically related to this topic then. So the context of the FAIRCORE4EOSC was basically the Sharia. I think in this meeting this slide is a bit unnecessary already. I think we saw this quite a few times. But the Sharia identified gaps in the state of the art. And these were related to identifiers, metadata and ontologies, interoperability, and research software. And consequently, these are then the focus of our development work in the project. FAIRCORE4EOSC is a research and innovation action. So that means that we are going to be doing concrete development work, not so much networking and community engagement as FAIR-IMPACT, but really we focus on software development basically. We develop 9 core components for EOSC that basically should pave the way for the MVE. And of these, I will talk a little bit more about 2 of them. But the idea is that these 9 core components, they help to actually realize the MVE and the establishment of Web of FAIR data. Now, the components that I want to talk about today is the metadata, schema, and crosswalk registry. Now, that is envisioned to be a service where you can deposit schemas, so host them there, or it can harvest schemas, so you can register them there if they're hosted elsewhere. And then we will develop a capacity to create concrete mappings between elements of schemas, and then those mappings will compose crosswalks, which is then the whole translation from schema to schema. And these crosswalks and mappings will be first-class citizens, so they will have PIDs, they are linked data entities on their own. They are not properties of the schemas that you are mapping between. So they have kind of autonomous presence, which also means that we will have an API through which you can access them and download them. What this also means is that it will generate the capacity to translate data, metadata, between 2 services. And this essentially, in my thinking, changes the game a bit. Instead of like trying to take a poor analogy of an HTML document that is online, if you want to change the contents of that, if you think of it in the old-fashioned way, you need to ask your developer to go change the content. But then with a wiki, anyone can go and maintain the content, so you don't need specialists to do the maintenance. And with this analogy, what I'm trying to say is that we will have crosswalks that a researcher can come and modify, so that if they need to aggregate data from 5 different sources, each using their different schemas, that actually enables you to go tweak those mappings, and that means that you can actually generate an engine that can pull in data in your own format from external services. And then the data type repository supports this mission, so that goes deeper. So if with the metadata schema and crosswalk repository, we create mappings between the different elements of the schemas, this is the types of data that are in those elements. So this allows you to have those as first-class citizens, so they are PIDed entities. You can point to the data type with a PID, but also they have structures between the data types. So it can be a composite data type, which is composed of a lot of different things, and essentially starts approaching the metadata schema registry in a way, because they also enable conversions between data types. So these conversions can be expressed as regular expressions, for example, and that actually allows then a data conversion, and not just metadata conversion. And those two things converge into each other quite nicely. We have 5 case studies in the project. One is the CLARIN, so the social sciences and humanities. And then from the 9 components that we develop, we use each of these case studies to actually show that these add value, the components that we're developing for specific communities. We have the climate change case study. And then we have a specific one on mathematics, where, for example, we take mathematical software and we integrate that with the software heritage's collection of source code, and we further pass that on to the RD research discovery graph, so that this becomes a part of the networked research objects that the OpenAIRE is developing. Then we have the case study on the European integration of national level services. So this is the CRIS case study in a way. And here, for example, we contribute to the development of the SERIF standard. So SERIF is the metadata standard for research information. And we will contribute to upgrading that so that it is linked data compatible. And we will, for example, map the Finnish National Research Information System to SERIF. We will map OpenAIRE's RD graph information models to SERIF. And what that means is that we can then natively pass information from the national CRIS systems to the OpenAIRE that is collecting them together. Or then we can utilize it for the individual universities for passing information to the national level. So this allows the kind of integration across this whole sector of research information. And then the last one we have is the UDAT. So this is the research data case study essentially. And for example, the different B2 instances that UDAT provides might have different metadata models because they are customized for different scientific communities. But that means that if you want to aggregate information on what they contain, then the different metadata schemas get in the way. And for data discovery, you have to find a way to kind of map them into a joint model, and that's again where we can utilize the metadata schema and crosswalk repository. We have just started basically the project, month 8, where we're in the process of developing the technical specifications, and that's what you guys are also helping us with a bit. So the first operational beta release of these tools will come next year in November. And then we will still have until the May of 2025 to finalize these products. So that's our timeline. We're just getting started. And yeah, these organizations together form FAIRCORE4EOSC, and we're just a speck of dust in this whole pool of other projects that we live with.
Contextualization. So thank you, Tommy. Yeah, I think it's my turn now. Although my presentation will have lots of overlap with that of Tommy, I hope to go into a bit more detail, especially which would be, how do you say, good for the discussion. Also,
is this one?
yeah. If I know how to work this. Yeah. So the main purpose of the MSCR component is to contribute to what they call the web of fair data and facilitate interoperability. I would say not only semantic, also structural. Sometimes these two things go together. For instance, if you use XSLTs, but the semantic interoperability is the topic for today. Tommy already said, yes, we will be providing a registry and hosting facility for metadata, schema, and the crosswalks and the semantic mappings. I will later specify what we mean exactly, because the difference between semantic mappings and crosswalks is sometimes not always clear, and it is good to clarify a bit, and you may disagree or agree, I hope. But anyway, so if we are talking about registries for metadata, for schemas in general, these things exist already, abundantly so, I should say. But for crosswalks and semantic mappings, I don't see so many of them around. Sometimes semantic mappings or crosswalks are included in metadata registries. They do more than just registering metadata, but it's a rarity. Looking at what metadata registries do you then mean? Where are you pointing to? Well, for instance, the RDA metadata registry, which is, I think, a fine one. There are a few others, but there are also very many thematic metadata registries around. And then there are a few reports on which we base ourselves. First, the SEMAF report. Many of you will know that, even have read it. And there is the FAIR semantic recommendations from FAIR's FAIR, which I think is the basis of what I know for this call to making also the semantic artifacts first-class citizens, needing also first-class data management, to which we will come later. So requirements for the MSCR component. The two reports, I already mentioned that. Tommy already referred to the community case studies. But I should also point out that we are planning a number of demonstrators. Demonstrators are intended to test and demonstrate the different components that we are creating. But where possible, we will try to make these demonstrators also, we say, professional software that can be used in practice. I think that, and I have good hopes there. But also, and this consider this an invitation to you. Where useful and possible, other initiatives are invited to contribute and test if their use cases can be integrated in what we plan. We would love it, of course, if you would bring your own resources there, but when we are able to align them with our own purposes, we will not hesitate to do that. Talking about semantic mappings, they are not always so complicated and the things that you can only specify in RDF. I think most of the semantic mappings that exist are stored in table formats like this. So these are two examples, I think, from biodiversity. So what you see here is simply a table, name of an element, the XPath to where it is in their metadata schema, and then where it maps to. And yeah, I think this is more the case than the RDF specified mappings. And we should not avoid the difficult parts here. Often complex mapping specifications and conversions are combined in technologies like XSLT. I think you already said this is difficult. Yeah, it is, but that's not a reason to avoid it. I think we should try also to capture them and to make them more fair than they are currently. Okay, semantic artifacts. Yeah, I think we can call all those things we try to manage semantic artifacts. XSD schemas are also semantic artifacts. Vocabularies are semantic artifacts. Semantic mappings are artifacts. So that's part of the list. Problem solving. No, let me pass that one. Okay, this. Let me pass that by. This is the slide I wanted to show you about the relationship between semantic mappings and crosswalks. This comes from the SEMAF report, but the basic idea here is that a crosswalks, the name comes, I think, from metadata practice, where you want to convert a metadata record from one schema into the metadata record that pertains to another schema. So I think the best way to model it is to say that a metadata crosswalk simply contains different semantic mappings. And you can have a little bit of a discussion. What does that mean with respect to the independence of the mapping and the independence of the crosswalk? From the SEMAF report, it was a long discussion, I remember it, we said, well, every semantic mapping should be independent, so it should have its own PID, its own metadata, etc. Because that will allow you to combine more easily the different semantic mappings into different crosswalks. On the other hand, maybe we will get a scaling problem there. I'm not so sure, but in that case, and we still have the freedom to make some decisions there, I would say it's the crosswalk that should be atomic, the lowest level of modeling, rather than the semantic mapping itself. But that is something I think we can address. Okay. So I already mentioned that semantic artifacts are there in different formats, right? They are there in RDF, for instance, for ontologies. They are there as XSD schemas, but they are also there in table formats like CSV, TSV. And the mappings between those can be either simply a directive to a user how to read the table, or in the form of an XSLT. I think we should try to deal with all of these. We want to have basic data management for all artifacts. And basic data management means here PID issuing, core metadata, description of the semantic artifacts, versioning, provenance. And I think if we do that, we already increase the fairness considerably for semantic artifacts that are currently still hidden, right? And that means we maybe do not address the interoperability, the eye of the FAIR, but I think that's for now acceptable. Of course, we can promote the upgrade of table-like formats into things like RDF or XSD schemas. This will make them, better players in the landscape of semantic services. But as a first step, I would already be quite content if we manage this. To address communities that already have their metadata infrastructure, and there are quite some communities that have a sound, stable metadata infrastructure, we should offer, I think, just them registering their semantic artifacts instead of insisting on hosting those things. It will make for better collaboration with those communities, and I think for the purpose of what we want to do, offering smart mapping tools, for instance, it does not make that much difference. Yeah. Nevertheless, you say that there is clearly a need also to advise communities with respect to the suitability of some formats to specify their semantic artifacts. How should we do that? We should not, I think, use the stick, but rather a carrot. What could be a carrot in this case? Well, for instance, smart tools that will help communities to create the mappings between the different schemas. Some organizations, some communities have this, how do you say, this need of maintaining mappings, because you know there is some drift there. I wouldn't call it semantic drift, but there is some drift with respect to the metadata schemas they use themselves, or the metadata schemas they need to translate towards their own semantic infrastructure. And currently, I've seen some of them do it well, but others, they use schemas, instructions that are not really fair, that are hidden. And I think with the MSCR we can offer them an environment which would make the management of maintaining those mappings much more easy. So that would be an idea. And Tommy already mentioned that we are planning to have here an API, not only for our own smart tools to, let's say, be able to interact with the registry, but also for community tools. We should really, and there are some smart programmers around, and if we offer a good API, I think we can perhaps, with some other incentives, convince them to develop some tools that will do perhaps metadata, creating metadata mapping in ways we cannot conceive yet. Right? So, general metadata management for all semantic artifacts, and some smart mapping tools that may require RDF. And yeah, if you want to use those smart tools, you have to upgrade your semantic artifacts. But if not, you can still use this basic data management. Yeah. Oh, where is it? Oh, right. There one. So this is this shows the different modes of registering or hosting that we will have. We will have MSCR hosted semantic artifacts, but we also foresee registering the semantic artifacts from different communities. Note also that in the SEMAF report there was a suggestion enabling the potential federating of the semantic registries. I think it might be a luxury in the sense we should maybe be glad if we have only one. But I can also see a potentiality that we could federate with other semantic artifact registries. So that's why I do it like that. Considering the smart tools, we have, of course, when we started writing the project proposals, and also in the SEMAF project, we looked what's available there. And there are some interesting tools. Communities have created really interesting tools with how you would provide an interface to enable users to create mappings. This is one. This comes from the DARIA infrastructure, the DARIA data modeling environment. And looking at this is really something that you would like to do. You have your schema here on the left, you have another schema on the right, and you can, let's say a knowledge engineer can simply create the mappings between that. I mean, perhaps it's oversimplified, but that's what you want to offer, right? There are things already available with respect, especially vocabulary alignment. These vocabularies, they can be huge, 10,000 of concepts, and it's very expensive to have a knowledge engineer creating those mappings by hand. So you have to make it as easy as possible. So this is the example of the Kokoda mapping tool. It's yeah, you should try it. It's really easy. There are others around. For instance, the Ariadne infrastructure created something called the vocabulary matching tool. And well, you will know, or those from Biomed will know, the ontology XREF service from EBI. And also, and these are also potential choices for our own technology, there are plenty of disciplinary vocabulary ontology platforms around. Cosmos comes to mind. You have OntoPortal based on BioPortal. And for the vocabularies, I think Cosmos, for instance, is a good example. So, summary. What do we want to do? Well, offer registration hosting of a broad class of semantic artifacts, no matter what the format, so allow table formats, XSSD schemas, etc. And we should offer essential management for the hosted semantic artifacts. We should publish and share these semantic artifacts in and between communities, so allowing communities to further update and add improvements to what we publish. I think it's really important that the communities are invited to contribute their effort with respect to creating these mappings. Semantic mappings and crosswalk to be first-class citizens, we already said that. Offer the smart tools for creating semantic mappings and crosswalks, and motivating users to upgrade to better representations. With that I mean, if you have table format, well, perhaps you should be motivated to upgrade to RDF. Target audiences, obviously research communities, projects and individual researchers. But there is also another interesting audience out there, and these are institutions, organizations that are interested in creating and maintaining the mappings for their own internal processes. I mean, these can be research related, such as, for instance, the folks that are maintaining B2Find. I know they have a hard task maintaining these mappings. And I think what we are going to build can help them, right? They're one of the, one of the demonstrators here. The CRIS databases come to mind, but other domains are conceivable, and we're open for suggestions there. Final slide. This is hopefully how it will look like in the end. We will have the schema and crosswalk registry. We will seed the registry with input, for instance, from the RDA metadata standard registry. We will have relations with some of the data management services that are already out there. So I already mentioned B2Find, but B2Share is another one. We will relate to the communities, A, B, and C, but other names should apply there. And yeah, I hope we can offer a valuable contribution to the semantic services landscape. Thank you. I think now a good moment for questions to our presenters.
So I find this a very interesting initiative and a necessary initiative. But I also want to highlight a potential risk here. So we could also do semantic mappings between bad ontologies. I speak here a little bit for Giancarlo Guizzardi, who always says, well, we don't have good ontologies out there, and if you are going to map these, it's even worse. So we have not talked about this part, but I think it's also necessary to be aware that there can be potentially lots of bad mappings. Yeah. How to address this quality issue?
Bad ontologies, I should remember that. But who are we to judge an ontology here? That's something that the community should do. right? Not the service providers. I mean, it would be wonderful, of course, if you can score. Hi, Barbara, I think this ontology is really bad. Are you prepared to do that? Yeah.
Yeah, just on that, I think in the original CEMAF work we anticipated this assertion, multiple assertions associated with each mapping for exactly that reason, because the infrastructure cannot make the judgment, but it must facilitate those judgments to be available to the end user.
Yeah. Well, there is, of course, I mean, I did not touch upon this topic, but whenever you do a registry, you have to think also about governance for that registry. Who's going to, let's say, to form the editorial board there? Because if it's just a matter of allowing everybody to create things there, you have a risk that it will, how do you say, run full of less helpful statements or bad ontologies there. So yeah, the question of an editorial board is something that we should do. But I think that is for more of the registries that we are going to build within the FAIRCORE project. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. Mine is not a question, it's rather a comment and an invite to collaborate. So I represent FAIRSharing, which you had on the slide actually. And FAIRSharing, it's also an RDA endorsed output. We have a working group in there. I wanted to say that this is fantastic what you want to do, and this is something that we don't do in FAIRSharing, and I think the link would be beneficial. Because in FAIRSharing, we register the standard, we describe them, and we make reference to each other because there are standards that are connected. You have a model that sometimes recommends use of a certain terminology, control vocabulary, ontology, and we create the relation among those standards, and we show them in graphs. So this could help the crosswalk, as well as we actually host crosswalk. But when I say host, it's not the same way you will do it. We just hosted the description. We say this is a crosswalk, the community has done it, here it's important. And again, we place it in this graph to create a relationship. And only very briefly, we also have RDA EOSC future funds because we have a curation program. So we get the help of the community and the cluster to curate those standards. So yet again, another link that we can create. So I will be happy to follow up with you afterwards.
Yeah. Thank you for that offer of collaboration. And I have to say, the FAIRSharing, a few years ago when we started to look, FAIRSharing was already there, but the last years it has made an enormous progress. And I found, let's say, the metadata schema for my own community, Clarin, was how do you say, homeless there. Nobody signed up to manage that. So I warned our, let's say, metadata expert, and he's now the proud owner of the CMDI entry in the FAIRSharing thing. So thank you. Yeah, we can certainly follow up on that.
Yeah, Karsten Neuer-Klick from the German Aerospace Center. I want to go back to the good and bad ontologies. I think it would be very important at least to develop some criteria or some guidance what is at least a better ontology. Because you can do quick and dirty ontologies, which are really bad, and you can try to do better ontologies like we do in the energy sector with the open energy ontology, but it's a painful, long-term consensus building process, and it takes a long, long time. But to have some guidance where it should go, what may be some criteria to get an idea if it's a better ontology, I think would help to create better ontologies for the whole science community.
Yeah, this sounds like something.
Yeah, well, I can comment later. I mean, I was just getting all the comments probably all together, and then we can comment on that. But I mean, I think that it's a good point. I mean, it's a very relevant point. Although I mean, probably there is not such an easy solution apart from really like a good governance. But I mean, let's later on, I mean, like discuss. I mean, I will go on to all of them, yeah, on all of the comments. So, we have more, yeah. There.
I would be interested how it's related your current to project and development to the FDO. FDO hosts a big conference
Yeah,
3 days.
Tell you it.
I was surprised by developers that they did this.
Well, yeah, well, the FDO work was on the slides of Oscar.
No, not really. I mean, I think that this is an important point, yeah? When in the EOSC Interoperability Framework document we are talking about FAIR digital object, we are not referring to FDO directly. I mean, I think that that's an important point, yeah? It's not really like it's not a recommendation of this is the implementation, it's just a concept. It's the concept that any object that we are using should be FAIR. The only thing is that, I mean, unfortunately, we have this term, and then the other term appeared. Yeah, so that's but I mean, it's just to be clear.
Okay, let me, because you are referring to the conference, and I was already in a panel as a representative of the FDO movement, as they called it. So let me try to answer that. I think everything we will create could be published as a FAIR digital object in the sense, in the semantic sense of what you are making. So every crosswalk, every mapping can be presented as a FAIR digital object.
But I still want to make a point that sometimes what I see at this conference, that there is a closed EOSC community, and they actually isolate themselves from the external development. And FDO development, from technical point of view, my assessment of
I would like to
quite good.
I would like to agree with you, but how can I say that? I mean, FDOs are, I think, a very important thing forward. But I mean, this vision is not shared by all communities yet. Yeah, but EOSC is not a community. EOSC is how do you say, a system of systems, a federation of communities. I don't think EOSC has a single view on how to create or how to deal with data. We're trying to create interoperability, and I think interoperability can be helped forward by FDOs. But that's another story. I don't want to hijack the semantic interoperability session by talking about what FDOs could mean here. I don't think FDOs will have an enormous impact on semantic interoperability. You will, let's say, the challenges will remain there of trying to. Now we are mapping between concepts in metadata schemas. When you want to create interoperability, semantic interoperability between FDOs, you will have to create mappings between community-provided attributes. It's in essence the same challenge. And but yeah.
But still, what I see, FDO movement provide a good vision on infrastructure level.
Yeah, I agree completely, but that's not this session.
I agree also.
I think the
semantic interoperability and infrastructure different sessions.
Yeah, I think it's different. I see for now the low-hanging fruit with FDOs is to have let's say an additional layer on the network layer, which will make it easy for FAIR digital objects to be moved around in communities and to be more easily consumed by community services than they are currently. But let's discuss that somewhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to come back to the discussion about bad and good ontologies. So I see as well this registry, the MSCR registry. Yes, as Dan said, we cannot justify if this is a good or bad. This is the community knows, but for sure, on the other hand, there should be some standards. But ontology itself, it's just a conceptual thing. But I see as well this registry, if somebody upload or register a bad ontology, you can comment on it, I think. And so the registry is not a discussion forum, but I think we will have a versioning and maybe this is the process. We don't know how it is then finally really looks like, but that you can score of but we have to start that we allow all the communities, all the users to register. Yeah. So, but I see the point that this is a big challenge of governance then.
It's a bit governance. Until now, what I know, all these recommendation systems, if you can call them like that, they are afraid, they are justifiable afraid of letting people comment on it. Why? Because as a register operator, you make yourself vulnerable for, how do you say, slander, or I mean, if you don't like your neighbor, then you can how do you say, villainize his contribution. So you should carefully consider what is possible and what you like and what you don't like. Yeah, please.
Just a further comment on the judging. Of course, we are afraid of judging because we see a lot of things on the internet. But on the other side, we're in science. We have an established practice of peer review. Yeah. So I think we could follow on. It's maybe not that anonymous, but there's a way kind of judging quality. And also, I think interesting is always a concept called fitness for use, to kind of mark what is really useful for it. Yeah. And I think would like to develop some guides how maybe some basic properties and ontologies would have to be better interoperable for EOSC. Yeah. So how they maybe should be structured, or something that you have, at least for those communities which don't have an ontology yet, that they can start out in the right direction. Yeah.
Well, I think that's a clear
point. Yeah. Probably. No. Yeah. Okay. I will use this one. Sorry. I mean, like to jump in. I was just waiting for I mean, like getting the whole round of feedback as this is becoming like an interesting point to discuss. I mean, I have been training ontology engineers for 20 years. Yeah, already. I mean, and then this has given me some hints on which are the things that could bring a good ontology or a bad ontology. I mean, last week that I was talking to some of my students, I mean, when I was telling them, how do you differentiate a good or a bad one? I was just saying, look at the documentation. Even the documentation is already giving you a hint, yeah? I mean, if it is well taken care of, probably it's a good ontology, yeah? I mean, it's not necessarily the case, yeah? I mean, then we have to go further and we have to see how much we can model with it or not. But I mean, probably it will give you a hint. To some extent, I mean, like, it's not a true or false statement that we can do. I mean, we have tools to evaluate things, yeah, and to evaluate some, I mean, typical problems that you could have. And as in software development, there are many different ways of modeling exactly the same type of concept and properties in a domain, yeah. But I think that, I mean, like, what it is quite clear is that this is a pain point. And this is what I was referring to at the very beginning, yeah? It's a pain point, I mean, like, for those ones who are entering in a community to understand, should I use this or this another one, yeah? We were discussing during breakfast on something that I'm finding in the railway infrastructure world, where there are different views, and I mean, like, some people are trying to impose their ontology. And I mean, we have this discussion, this open discussion. And I really appreciate this comment on having the open discussions. Yeah? I mean, running as we do in software. Yeah, I mean, like making it, having a governance process in the end. I mean, where people can comment, can just say, oh, I can model this, I cannot model this. This is probably a better option to model this. I mean, and there is like a fruitful discussion over there. I don't think that we have to impose it, but at the same time, I think that in the context of semantic interoperability, this is a pain point. Yeah, I mean, like, to some extent, in quotes, avoiding bad ontologies. Yeah, this is what we want to avoid, so that anybody, any new buy who enters, doesn't select that ontology because, I mean, they didn't know what to select. But let the community discuss and have a governance process on that context. And I think that, I mean, this is a recommendation that we can do. Yeah, I mean, and I really think that, I mean, we could just go into that direction without being extremely formal, yeah, which is, I think, one of the major bottlenecks or barriers that we would actually find if we really want to say we should be super, super formal. No, I mean, there will be people from the formal world that will be also helping on making those ontologies better. That's my view, yeah? Mm-hmm. Barbara? Yeah.
Sorry, I just want to... my focus
Give it back
would
to
be
Jan,
now...
yeah, afterwards.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Barbara.
My question was more targeted towards the bad mapping at the end, because you can have false assumptions because you think that this might mean this, and then there it becomes really tricky. And it's not that I want to judge it, I just say that there are people that are working on this as you a long time, and they know that there are issues, and the issues will increase when you do false assumptions in mapping. Mm-hmm. That's what and that's just something to consider, yeah, and not to neglect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I just want to say that we will probably enable also bad crosswalks, because we have been discussing that we might have like community endorsed crosswalks, which would be the de facto standard to use. But because we also intend to support individual scientists whose crosswalks will be fit for purpose. So in that sense, they will develop it for a very specific thing that they need to do, and they could be incomplete and totally irrelevant for a different use case. So tailorability versus then having the kind of endorsed or community crosswalks is something that we have been thinking about.
If I can add to that, some of the crosswalks, some of the mappings might be valid, but only under certain conditions, right? And that's why also we need to provide enough contextual metadata for the mappings for the crosswalks, so that people can see that. So you don't think it's a stupid researcher that made a mistake, made a mistake, but it was a well-considered action to have that mapping, but under those conditions. Yeah,
so if I may, it's really hard to say good or bad ontologies, right? I mean, some of the bad ontologies we would consider bad because they are application ontologies, so they fit a purpose, exactly. And so you need to keep the mappings, right? Because they have been used in a context. So if you want to reproduce, you will have to keep these bad mappings, which are good for the person who made them. So it's really hard, and I think I definitively agree that it's not our job to do that. That will be the job of people who are going to reuse these mappings to actually decide whether or not they can be used. One thing that could be actually proposed to help making decision is to track down how many times these mappings have been accessed and reused by who and which community, so that you could have quantitative numbers or quantitative vision of is it useful or not. And then maybe at some point when you realize that there are some mappings that are never used, then you just drop them off.
I just want, for the reproducibility of science, we need to keep those bad mappings, because now that the mappings will have identifiers, you can, in your paper, say that I used these 5 data sets and then I used these 15 mappings. So you need the pointers and you need the persistence of those mappings so that you can recreate your research. And then I was also thinking that we have the TRL, the technology readiness levels. So should we extrapolate from that we have some kind of an ontology maturity level or something that we could have like a classification system?
Just adding to that, still about bad and editorial responsibility.
Okay, so
there have been.
Here we have 2 subjects that are different. If we have direct comment.
Yeah, okay. But there is still time enough to talk about bad ontologies. We will frame you completely, Barbara, in this session.
To add something optimistic, the bad ontology is always the potential for improvement. So you want to a new ontology, a new crosswalk, be able to walk to point at its predecessor that sort of this is an improved version of that one.
Versioning allows you to do that.
Yep.
Should allow you to do that. There is. By the way, there is.
Direct, and then we have.
Yeah. Okay. There is. You saw his finger.
Okay. Yes, bad ontology or not bad ontology. We are discussing here, if I understand it correctly, for interdomain approaches. Different kind of domains, different kind of disciplinarities, different kind of concepts. My first question would be how looks like the governance in this case? And the second question would be, what's about cross-domain approaches in the discussions that we are now started?
Governance is something that we need to solve for other registries also. And there are examples there. The lady from Fair Sharing is certainly, let's say, has partly the same problem there, right? Yeah.
That's very true. I mean, we also, for example, tag.
It's arriving.
Tag the status of the life cycle of that specific standard, because some of them are no longer maintained. You know, the community developed them, leave them. Sometimes they live on their own. Sometimes they live because they are implemented by data repository, which, as a parenthesis, that's also what we do in FAIR Sharing. We connect which standard are implemented by which repository. That means that even if the community behind the standard isn't there to, let's say, add a new term, but at least you know that there is a bunch of data set being implemented, so there is a valid thing. Some deprecate, some get supersede, some get merged. So yeah, this and governance vary. Very quickly, there are obviously like more ISO level type of standard, and again, they are created by committee, but then remain as such. And grassroots, they tend to be a little bit maintained longer, but yet if the committee loses the funds, God knows what's happened to those standards. So it's a complex landscape that, yeah, as long as you are aware.
Being Dutch, I see immediately a business case arriving for certified ontologies. Yeah, Mate.
So, if nobody wants to continue now this discussion of the good and bad ontologies, I can just briefly come back to one topic that was mentioned before, which was the FDOs, which I think, for me, it's a relevant topic in the sense that, especially if we talk, for example, about a particular example of implementation, like is the research object, which of course Oscar knows very well because we have been also working on that for many years, which can actually, you know, it provides some kind of exemplary way of making the specification with vocabularies that can provide the basis to enable some interoperability in the sense that you can exchange information in the similar way, describing how, for example, resources are connected to each other in a graph that is connected and has some kind of boundaries, which is related to your research investigation, for example. So this is something that we have been putting into an example in the use cases in the task force subgroup of the semantic interoperability one. So it would be nice also to hear from, you know, especially you and Oscar, especially on this point, what do you think about this? Yeah?
You mean the implementation of, for instance, a vocabulary as a fair digital object, or?
No, the implementation of a FDO, basically. So the example in this case being the research object, you know, as a you know, auto-create implementation and that kind of specification that you can have for sharing investigation and putting boundaries and kind of.
Well, it depends. It depends a bit on the implementation also of the FDO itself. There are different ways. I mean, I know of three. You can make use of the handle record. You can make use of signposting, and there was a proposal to use AS400 as the basis for storing the FDO information. But I think that's not so important. What's important is what are the essential attributes that the FDO should have. I mean, as a fair data object, or as a data object, it should, for instance, have attributes that tell who is the owner, who is responsible for this fair digital object. Because in my vision, fair digital objects start wandering. They can wander from one repository to another repository, and you should always be able to find the responsible party. The orphaned fair digital objects should be removed. And then there is the second tranche of attributes that should specify what are the how do you say, the essential semantic properties of the semantic artifact. And but that is not different than trying to think of a minimal metadata set for vocabularies, for instance. And I mean, the exercise is not different. What is different is that it's much more easy to access that information in the fair digital objects. But that's another. I think it's another story. At least in my opinion.
I think. Yeah. I mean, just to add a little bit on that. I don't see. I mean, like the point on the aggregation. I mean, that you normally do in this type of research objects when we are talking about them. Just take a look at a simple case. I mean, like just a data set, that you are trying to make, or a couple of records in a data set that you are trying to make a digital object that you want to share with others. I mean, and this was actually in the document of the EOS IF, the original document. We already cover some of these parts, just saying, okay, I mean, you could have these digital objects going around. Okay, and they will have their metadata payload. I mean, you will see them as an onion, an onion where you are putting layers. In this case, instead of removing them, you are putting them. You are adding layers, and in those layers that you could add, you could actually add mappings. I mean, you could add these crosswalks or these mappings, and add a new layer. This doesn't mean that it is on top. I mean, it's just yet another view on the same digital object according to this vocabulary, according to this new ontology, using these type of mappings. I mean, and then you could have inside the references to the crosswalks that you have used, to the mappings that you have used. I think that this is a very nice way, of moving these digital objects around. And I mean, like, then you view them as you want to view them, I mean, you want to view them according to this ontology. Okay, I have mappings already, and I have metadata about this data object here, I mean, in this part of the metadata. Oh, I have another piece of metadata, another layer of metadata, which is according to this another ontology. Great. I mean, I think that that's one of the key elements that, I mean, we should try to convey. There is not a single piece of metadata. There may be several layers of, I mean, not even layers, several metadata items associated to the object, and I think that could be a useful view.
Maybe I can also refer to one of the case studies that we are going to do in FAIRCORE. The shock or the Clarion case study is about the virtual collection registry. These virtual collections are, well, you could consider them also as a bit of an extended fair digital object implementation. Virtual collections is just metadata and links to, let's say, payload objects that are hosted at different repositories, which may, entertain different metadata schemas to describe their resources. And the virtual collection, you would like to be able to consider that in a coherent way, semantically speaking. So you need the crosswalks from every schema that is involved there to whatever you like. And whatever you like can differ, of course. So you need different mapping schemas there.
Sorry.
Yep. Name? What name? Virtual collection registry?
Yes. Sorry, so just to answer your questions about FDO relation with ArrowCrate. So I'm the co-chair of the FDO SEM, which is a working group that tries to implement the FDO specification using the semantic web standards. And so we have been discussing with Stian, and Oscar is also present. So the thing is that the FDO is really like an anatomic piece of information, right? So for instance, an FDO about data, there will be the data is an FDO, but the metadata is also an FDO. And so what we have been looking into with AuroCrate is that actually AuroCrate is a nice way to bundle FDOs together, because you have workflow information, you have provenance information, and all the metadata. So it's not necessarily a good model for the atomicity of the FDO, but it's a fantastic model for bundling. So these are things, this is still ongoing work, and it's going slowly, but surely. So we are working now on the semantic model for an FDO, the sort of the core layout, and then we'll work on doing the mappings with AuroCrate and the other formats, just to make sure that they are compatible.
Okay, well, I think we are very deep in the open microphone session, right? It's not.
Well, I mean, I think that this is what makes sense.
Which is okay. I think.
You have other plans still?
But I also had the topic and about how do you say? Are we paying enough attention to semantic interoperability in EOSC, or are we paying too much? Are there too many initiatives? I would really like to.
There is still one pending.
Yeah, but he didn't want to anymore. What's?
I just wanted to switch the topic.
Okay.
So
okay.
Okay. Maybe just it's for my understanding, and I was not paying attention enough in your slides. I'm not sure, but so in this registry, who would? I'm wondering, who are the users of the registry specifically, or who do you expect to register digital artifacts? Would it be the researchers or communities, and who would be is the owner of the records there? So would you expect then the people who register them that they take care of maintaining them, or?
Well, there are initially we would try to seed the registry with what is available, and I already had offers from different sites. Here we have our series of crosswalks of XSLTs. Please register or use them for testing. So we will seed the registry. But after that, the intention is that it's that the users would be researchers indeed, or organizations that would use the registry and the smart tools to maintain their crosswalks, their mappings.
Registering, for example, an ontology, which is already located somewhere.
Yeah. Well. Registering the ontology is a first step into be able to use the tools.
We can discuss later. No.
First, that's only a remark. We are working in the task force Semantic Interoperability. This is a subgroup in Oscar's group, and we are discussing now a landscape overview about semantic interoperability, discussing, I would say, 3 main points of interoperability. What should be addressed? This is the first one. The second one, what would be interesting for practice, for good practice, and the third one, how can we close the gap between practice and concepts? This is a landscape overview that we have, that we are elaborating strongly at the moment. We got some drive in the last 3-4 days. It was amazing, absolutely amazing to see that. And the second one is then go deeper inside the crosswalks, inside the metadata standards, inside to what could be the relevant interoperability indicators. And let's see, at the end of, I would say, 23, we know more about that, hopefully. Then we have elaborated the stuff for coming really deeply active, I hope. This is what I like. And we would be very, 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 very interested in how we can make the link to your experience or expertise and to our expertise. This would be great.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, it will be a very nice report to read. I mean, it will be a really good reference. I mean, I'm following what has been done there, and I can tell you. Yeah, okay. For those ones.
We hope for a place too in your report, of course.
So don't worry, you're there. So we made a list of all the interesting projects, and so you're in. Because we're also trying to working with the same task force, and so one thing that we're also curious about is that what are the different strategies set up by the communities and use cases to actually achieve certain levels of semantic interoperability. So you have your use cases, and we'll certainly be happy to hear about the use cases from FAIRCORE4EOSC, how they are doing that or how they are planning to do it, which are the different ways of doing that. Now I'd like to come back to the issue of the users brought up by the gentleman that left. I think it's a very good point, because if you start having researchers messing around with ontologies and mapping, which is definitively not their job, except for some very small number of people, I think you need to take that into consideration, and then maybe focus not this on saying, well, we're doing mapping, but to collect also the metadata that describes in which context, which means why you do that, for which purpose, so that really you collect, like, I'm doing this mapping for this project, so that you get the information. And I think this needs to be
we are very aware of needing to capture the right contextual information for this, because a mapping can be good in one case and it can be a bad mapping in another case. That's sure.
I think that, I mean, one thing that we have is I can just. It's a fundamental characteristic that, I mean, like, I'm working on mappings with industry. Yeah, I mean, like, I'm doing quite a lot of work in industry. And over there, I mean, it's mostly data engineers who are the ones doing this type. I mean, I'm very worried on that, and helping us whenever we are doing this type of mappings and understanding and validating, the ontologies that we build for them, so that data scientists can later on use them. The only constraint that we have in many cases in the research context, the one where we belong over here right now, is that in many cases all those data engineers and data scientists are coming together. I mean, it's the researcher themselves, that are both data scientists, data engineers. In many cases, I mean, there are disciplines where this differentiation is a little bit more clear. And then, I mean, you could actually find data engineers that you can talk to, and they understand the formats, they understand the constraints in the models and so on. In this case, I mean, we are bringing everything together, and probably there is one researcher that is actually having all the hats at the same time. And this is the main differential. I mean, I think that the main differentiation factor that we have in this context. I mean, I think that we have to agree with it. I mean, it's how it is. And this is, I mean, like, identifying those pain points, and also probably like making it more clear, this is the role that you are playing right now, and this is what you are doing, and that's part of the context as well. I think that's... Whomever.
Sorry, just another comment to reinforce how important your work is. To follow Kurt's comment on the task forces, wearing another hat, I'm part of the task force for FAIR metrics. Now, within that one, we obviously discuss evaluation, assessment against the community standards, the metadata schema. And it's so difficult to do it when they are in different formats, in different ways, they're not compatible. So that potentially something to bear in mind too. What you are doing will facilitate how a FAIR evaluator can check the compliance of a data set against a metadata model. Does it have the same field and etc. So that's another important thing. Finally, I wear another hat. I'm also one of the lead of the Elixir interoperability platform. Unfortunately, I don't see life science as a use cases. I'm not blaming you because you have so many, but perhaps it's something we can test and play too. In the life science, we have tons of metadata standards, and some mapping has already been happening. So I'm interested from that viewpoint too. As you can see, I can wear many hats, and what you're doing is essential.
Yeah. Well, like I said, there is room for other use cases.
Is it a possibility to collaborate a little bit on the metadata schema for the mappings or at least comment?
Yeah. There is plenty of opportunity to collaborate. That's true. I think minimal metadata for semantic artifacts. That should be an output of your FAIR-IMPACT, right?
There is a FAIR-IMPACT task.
Yeah, there is a task there, and you can specialize, of course, from vocabulary to ontology. They will need a bit different contextual metadata there. But yeah, you write great reports, so why not?
Yeah, so well, to wear yet another hat, like Susanna.
There are too many hats.
So and the task lead in FAIR-IMPACT on the mapping task. So that's the idea, right? So we are going to take over what has been done in CEMAF, and we want to discuss with different communities that have models, and the idea of the task is to see whether or not we can define overarching models for mappings and crosswalks with proper metadata, provenance, and define what's minimum, what's not, so that we can make them fair. So we don't want to rebuild anything, because there are already models like in life science. There is the SSSOM model that's been cited in Dan's slide. So the way we will proceed as we are a CSA is like we did in FAIR is FAIR for FAIR semantics. We'll organize workshops and invite the communities to actually provide their feedback. What kind of metadata do we need? No, it's not yet organized, so it's work in progress. Sorry. That's the problem of wearing too many hats. At some point, there's only 7 days in a week and 24 hours a day. So, but it should happen early next year.
Sure. Maybe we should also. I mean, we still have 5 minutes, and maybe
we are 5 minutes away. Yeah. So one of the things. Yeah. So one of the things that that we had prepared, just in case that we didn't have enough discussion, that we were pretty sure, yeah, that there could be some interesting leads to discuss, was a small exercise, a small piece of homework for you to really help us identify those stories, those pain points, yeah, that we were talking about before, yeah. I had generated a Google Doc for that, but I don't think that it is really needed. You have my contact details. You can just find me. I would really ask you, yeah, just before leaving the room, to send me an email in case that you are interested to comment with me and with my team on some of the interoperability pain points that you have. This is really the only thing that I'm asking you. I promise that I will take care of your email address, yeah? Of your email, and I will reply, because basically what we want to do is to identify, yeah, as many cases where you have had a good or a bad experience in terms of semantic interoperability. We want to understand which are the artifacts that you used. Were you using ontologies? Were you using XML schemas? Were you using just tables? Just something, that you wrote down in a piece of paper? How you were actually addressing, yeah, your semantic interoperability problems? Do you think that was semantic interoperability or not? Sometimes we have also this. And with this, and together with the use cases that we have in the project, we will start this cataloging exercise, and we will start nailing down into the functionalities that the components are providing currently and the ones that they may have to provide in the future. Yeah, it's just taking care of all those. So either you write me an email or you just take a note of that. It's just a completely open document, so don't erase anything from anybody who has been writing down something there. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's, yeah.
There are 3 subgroups in the semantic interoperability task force, and I ask you, what's about task force 2? So Well, you are the boss. So are you continuing with this or not? Sorry for this.
Okay, no problem. I can talk about that. So as you know, Silvio is the one who is kind of leading this type of work. We have been a little bit slower than what we wanted. I mean, just because of peak of work that especially he had. But the main idea that we have over there in that very specific theme is actually, as you know, trying to identify what we understand by a semantic artifact catalog. Over there, I mean, we are very, very focused on which are the catalogs for semantic artifacts, which are the functionalities that they have, I mean, that they are currently providing, how they are used, how we are defining them. So the basic objective over there is really to come up with a survey paper, where we are analyzing all the references that are being done to ontology catalogs, vocabulary catalogs. I mean, you have been talking about Cosmos or Bookbench or all these things. I mean, all these tools that are around that many people are just discussing, are seeing, both from industry and from research, come up with those ones and propose, give an idea of which are the functionalities that they should have. We are not, I think, I mean, that is not in our idea, we are not going to go down into what are the metadata schemas that they are using for registering the artifacts, although we may have some links. I mean, okay, and look, these are metadata schemas that they are using. I mean, like LOV is using this, Bookbench is using that one. Is this enough? Isn't this enough? But probably we won't go into too much detail on that part, I think. Yeah, definitely, yeah. No worries, I mean, we can talk about that later.
Just very short, Mike. I think this is also something where we should exchange between the technical interoperability task force, because I think this is just an overlapping topic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. In fact, that's one of the main ideas there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, I think it's exactly on time. Mm-hmm. So before I say thank you, if you still have a use case for our MSCR, please contact me. I will exchange mails with you and see what we can do there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thank you all very much for your contribution. It was an exciting discussion. We have now made contacts with a few new, at least people, for me, people in the landscape. I'm happy for that. And there will certainly be follow-ups on that. So thanks very much.